The messaging strategy. There are a couple of components to this. One, the words that are being said, and then it's the to whom are you saying them, and the cadence, the touch points, and the channels that you're reaching out in. I mentioned it before in a way where I said the effectiveness and strength that you probably have in responding to emails and handling objections and positioning is not a developed muscle that you have. Most of the time, early stage company leaders are technologists or know the marketplace that they're serving very well, but they haven't sold into that marketplace, or they haven't sold before. So recognizing that's the case, this topic is important largely because it creates a framework for you to feel how you can improve the strength of your messaging versus just guessing at it. The framework we will introduce is something called direct or indirect, and the impact that it has. So indirect impact or direct impact. So from the perspective of the prospect or buyer, you can communicate on a spectrum to me of the impact to my business. It's either going to indirectly impact my business or directly impact my business. We'll talk about that. The correlation between that and the sales cycle length or the ability to win. I'll bring up an example now. And you think about loss in a line, whether it's a pipe or a transmission line of electricity, or in just communicating with someone. The more steps in between the source and then the receiver, the more opportunity for electrical loss, the more opportunity for velocity loss, the more opportunity for conversations and what you intend to communicate to get missed. And so if you think about that from a sales perspective, the message that you communicate to a sales rep, to a prospect, as it goes internal in that prospective organization, it gets lost along the way. You're thinking about your message constantly, right? You might not sleep sometimes because you're thinking about it. I can tell you, your prospect's not going to lose sleep thinking about how they're going to communicate your message to their boss or their manager, and your sales rep is not going to lose sleep probably either. So the importance is to strengthen up the source of that conversation as much as possible, the source of the value proposition as much as possible, and enable the prospect to communicate the direct impact as easily, as efficiently as possible. How might you guess is the difference between an indirect impact to a prospective business and a direct impact? Keeping in mind, I've said it will drive, a direct will drive a shorter sales cycle length. It'll drive a higher win rate. The answer is, well, clearly you see the visual, right? The direct impact hits a financial statement now. So it hits their financial statement now. An indirect impact might hit a financial statement in the future. Might, probability, future, time. Direct, now, certainty. Indirect, maybe, future. You can see it directly, the impact to sales cycle length and the ability to win, and the reference points I've made of transmission loss or communicating through someone. That's the difference. Now, you might not be afforded a situation where you can communicate a product which impacts revenue and cash and costs now. I don't know of many who do, right? There are some that are payback periods inside of a month. They're great. They have easier time selling. Yours might not have that, but there is a way for you to proxy and step someone through to show them how it's going to be direct. If you don't help them understand, you're putting the burden on them to do the calculus themselves, and they're not going to do it. Unless they're an early adopter of something and they're such a strong advocate and they completely understand why and they feel the pain is quantified, and for some reason they have pull with the decision maker or they are the decision maker, then you might be able to get around it. Otherwise, you have to help them understand very quickly how they can connect the dots to a direct impact. In short, don't put the burden on them to understand how risk mitigation or saving time is going to translate into a benefit for the business that's going to hit a financial statement or going to align with a strategic goal that they have. So the activity, pick one persona in one of the market segments that you serve. Maybe it's the first market segment that you might, when you have time, right, you identify what your first market segment is that you're going to prospect into in this calendar, you would pick one of the personas there. But pick a persona and write down a feature or two features that help them, that benefit them, and describe the value proposition. And not grammatically correct, just describe it. You could say increase customer satisfaction, right? A better version of that would say increase customer satisfaction by a percentage, something like that. And then go through an exercise in your head about how it might impact them directly. What are the ways in which you can translate that to revenue or cash on a balance sheet or cost saved? Some organizations, you might say risk is a liability, and they might have that on a financial statement. So that too is sort of it's the gray one that might be on there. But think of a persona, write down a couple features that might help you describe the value that they get, and then take that step to figure out how might you communicate that to when it will hit the financial statement. We'll take maybe 3 or so minutes and sort of just jot that down. And then if anyone has a question about their particular situation, please bring it up. It certainly will be helpful for the others to hear how you have attempted to move it to a direct impact. And as you're talking, or as you're going through this activity, imagine that this will inform your messaging, your actual emails, what you talk about and prioritize in a phone call or a voicemail or your LinkedIn message. So if there's friction or you're not able to get them to respond to the message, this is what we're working on right now. The ability to go from working, I'm reaching out to someone, to getting them to respond to me. This is what we're working on in this particular exercise. And it will largely be the content that is inside of your cadence that you have for each persona, which is the next slide we'll talk about. So this is the last slide. So here's some guidance in terms of the frequency by which you might want to touch different personas and the duration of a cadence. These aren't concrete things, and it changes. Not all of these aspects change, but it changes over time as the noisiness of different mediums, different channels changes. Direct mail, not a very noisy environment right now, but email, very noisy. So things change over time, but there are some things to be mindful of as not stalwarts, but things that are very common now, best practices. You might have 3 categories of person that you're speaking with. Gatekeeper to a decision maker, or an executive, I should say. And then someone else, so gatekeepers and executives, and then people using the product or influencing, maybe championing it internally. So in the bottom right, decision makers, executives, economic buyers, the people who have a higher title, stretch out the duration of the cadence to be longer. It's more likely that you'll get their attention is in a lot of different places. So stretching it out over a longer period of time avoids the situation where they might have been fully focused on a particular project and it happened to have aligned with when you were reaching out to them and you just missed it because you reached out to them when they were working on a project. Stretching that out over time gives you more opportunities for you to have found the right moment. That's one thing. You'll notice, I'll pick some patterns here. You notice that the second sentence or bullet in each one of these is waiting a period of time and then cycling them back through. Every one of these should be cycled back through a cadence again, or put into a list where you're providing them some updates on the product or the marketplace you're serving, or the pains or challenges that they are in their environment. It's not a one-time thing. Certainly it's an initial cadence, but after that, wait and either put them through the cadence again, which is a rudimentary brute force way, or introduce a catch-all place where you can keep in touch with them. The other things to note, the user champion, there's a lot more mediums that you're going to want to reach out to them on. They're largely the people participating in the evaluation. The decision maker and economic buyer rarely are the initial person that says, yeah, I want to evaluate your product. Certainly you want to educate them on the evaluation and give them the opportunity. So imagine it as a leader at a company that has a gatekeeper or an assistant, emailing and letting the economic buyer know, that executive know, that you are reaching out to other people and that this has value to the organization in a couple of different ways for these different people is very important. Predominantly email and LinkedIn. They're unlikely to respond. You need to do it anyway if you're going to set up this process and system, because there's a chance that they do. You will test and figure out how to communicate with them best, but you just want them to be cognizant of your brand, your name, as you communicate with the other users and the gatekeepers. The gatekeeper is a much shorter cadence. They tend to respond on the behalf of the executive. And also the important thing is to introduce phone calls in this particular cadence versus a decision maker and economic buyer. They will pick up the phone more frequently, so you'll have more conversations and they can hear your voice. And if you improve at your ability to develop rapport with that person, it won't happen in the first, it's unlikely to happen in the first sequence, but in your next one, 2 months down the road or 4 months down the road, if you continue doing this, you will start having some of those gatekeepers with the relationship that has built allow you to get on the calendar of the executive. On the left side, the third line, value to them and adjacent stakeholders. The key there is speaking to the benefit that others in the organization might see. And this is dependent on situational dependence, but don't single thread the value that you have just to them. Make them aware of the value that it provides to others, because if they're familiar with the strategic initiatives of the business, you might communicate how your product helps them in a way that doesn't help them specifically, but they're aware of a strategic initiative that you're communicating how your product helps or your service helps. And it's going to flag in their mind of, okay, I need to take a look at this. The other thing is, let them know that you're reaching out to others in the organization. There's a book called Power to Get In. It's a very, very old book, but fundamentally, by you referencing that you're talking to other people, or at least reaching out to other people, you will have, psychologically, they'll be mindful that, oh, he or she or whoever you are intending to reach out to someone, they're more likely to respond. It's going to be a longer cadence in terms of number of touches, or I guess a more dense cadence. And you're going to likely reach out across any channel that you have the ability to reach out. Twitter, Instagram, like those are the outliers ones, and directly on the outlier ones.